Okay, so now we're going to do Economic History, Theoretical Concepts, Part 3 in our Economic History course. And we get to the famous Karl Marx. And basically what we're doing here is we're juxtaposing the ideas between Friedrich Hayek Karl Marx. So Karl Marx is not really fully understood in American academia, the way it's practiced. When I went to school at the New School for Social Research, there was a lot of European Marxists. And the difference between American Marxists and European Marxists is that Karl Marx, what he called the capitalist stage of history, he thought that the capitalist stage of history was so productive that if we let it run unfettered, in other words, without government intervention, that there would be enough wealth created that you could have a revolution. And then people would no longer need to work anymore. Everything could be owned in common. You didn't have to work 9 to 5, alienating jobs. You didn't have a bunch of debt. You have this utopian period called communism. After socialism, after the working class takes over all the property of the capitalist class, they socialize everything, take it over by the state, and then the state withers away and everything's in common. And that's European Marxists. During the I've read speeches that he's given to labor union members in Europe, saying no, don't strike, don't fight, don't try to get an incremental penny, just allow capitalism to take its role, and then we'll have the revolution. So Marxists are always waiting for the revolution. American Marxists are different. They want intervention and use the class struggle as an excuse for an intervention, as opposed to class struggle as a determining feature of history where the working class overthrows the capitalist class. So historical materialism. So you get economics, and then political economy, then economics, and people started to evaluate economics laws of motion. But Marx believed that we were, or the philosophers of the Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment, Hegel specifically, believed that humans' consciousness was ideas, what I called earlier moral imagination. But Marx said, no, it's not ideas which are the ruling force, it's the social relations of production. It's the material reproduction of human beings, that how that's done, who owns what in that process, and that determines our consciousness. The social relations of production, or who owns what in society. In the United States, for example, capitalism is defined as private ownership of the means of production. Socialism is defined as the state ownership of the means of production. So it's who owns what, and then what are the underlying, and then that then determines the underlying relations. And that's called the social relations of production. And he had this consciousness idea that technology at a given time determines the social structure at a given time, or the social relations at a given time. So today, I mean, I've read where Karl Marx said, oh, the railroad, that's going to be the technology that's going to allow the revolution, or some type of, and we'll get into logistics curves and the theory of change over time. So, for example, the smartphone today, this is a huge technological advancement that it wasn't even dreamt of 10, 15 years ago. Instantaneous information, instantaneous, in economic speak, transactions cost. Oh, I'm going to DC for the weekend and I need to stay somewhere. I'm on the train. Oh, Airbnb, right? Or it's raining out and I need I broke my leg from falling down the stairs, the ladder while I was renovating the apartment. I need to get an Airbnb. I mean, you get a lift, you know what I'm saying? And then, oh, I need new tennis balls. Bam, bam, bam. They arrive the next day, right? I mean, this stuff is miraculous. And that's why you're not getting the inflation that people, well, we still have almost twice the average rate of inflation, but all the money printing that's occurred and all the spending, inflation should be much higher. But because transactions are so much aided by this, that you're not getting, well, up until COVID, the bottlenecks that caused inflation. So then you get a new technology, and that gives you a new social relations of production. And there's many, many examples: printing press, gasoline turbine engine. One of my favorite examples is container shipping. Many, many different. And our book, Cameron and Neil textbook, is filled with these technological advances. So here's an example. Prior to capitalism, again, capitalism means accumulated capital. And the reason, prior to, well, when Locke was writing, so probably around, right, starting with the Renaissance, you start getting animal grazing was common land, and people hunt on common land and fished on common land, and animals grazed on common land. But then as the population increased, especially in an island nation like England, people started fencing off that property and declaring it their own. And this is called the fencing in concept. And you can do a case study on this if you're interested. So then once people start to fence in land, well, then you start to get a landed class, those that own that land. I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say, once you start being careful with the stewardship of the land, then it becomes productive and you get a surplus. You get more than just the reproduction of the species. You get a surplus. And then that surplus then can be invested in technological change and research and development. Patents, well, that's another story. So the fencing in, which is a decentralized process, no credentialed apparatchik, no expert is telling you to fence in your land. You're doing it because of self-interest. And so that fencing in phase is a very important one in economic history, because it starts the evolution of the idea of property rights. And then people have built upon this idea of the fencing in. You should only fence in that which you can work. Don't be greedy, or whatever that means. Don't be greedy and only fence in that which you can work. So for Marx, the institutions or the social relations of production are contained within the economy, or the economy is the social relations of production, and the institutions are embedded. Now, for Marx, the power structure determines society's institutions. Now, how untrue is that? I mean, who went to public high school in the United States and learned that Franklin Delano Roosevelt got us out of the World War II by drafting 900,000 people? You don't get the drafting 900,000 people. You get the fact that he got us out of the war, or he got us into the war. So, I mean, again, the model you find the most useful to solve the problems you want to solve. And then we have Friedrich von Hayek. He won the Nobel Prize for his monetary explanation of the business cycle. Did we talk about that last time? Yes, we did. Right. So we did a hard-fire TV show called a Simple Explanation for the Business Cycle. And that's a encapsulated version of Hayek's monetary explanation for the business cycle. You've already had macroeconomics if you've made it this far in class, so you can't have me for that course. So for Hayek, the economy is embedded within the larger social institutions. And this is the more standard version of it. But you know, there's some truth to that too. You can be a Marxian without being a Marxist. What's that?
Oh, I don't thank you. Fascinating.
Yeah. Said you can be a Marxian, believing some of his things, but not a Marxist. You don't have to believe in a violent revolution or a class struggle. You can believe in some of his ideas and find them good. If you're an economist, Marx is a good sociologist. If you're a sociologist, Marx is a good economist. Okay. So the capitalist stage of history. So under Marx's capitalist stage of history, you have the capitalist, the working class, and only the working class creates value. That's the labor theory of value. We're going to look at, that's the labor theory of value, where only labor creates value. Of course, the anarchists critique that. Oh no, it's the heart, the head, the hands, and the heart. You can't break people into capitalist and working class. We all need to feed ourselves and our families. So we're all working class. So Marx had a labor theory of value. The classical economists had a labor theory of value. And then that all ended with the marginal revolution at the same time as psychology around the 1870s. So Marx got this labor theory of value where only the working class creates value. So reproduction plus surplus is the economy. This is reproduction. This is where human beings reproduce themselves. There's no surplus. And then you get a profit or a surplus, again, through evolution of property rights and the fencing off, profit motive, incentives for efficiency. And then that's the economy. And then so Marx looked at, so that in the Marxist system, the wages are the reproduction. Apparently he's only concerned with the reproduction of the working class. And then these other surplus, interest, rent, profit, those are all exploited labor. So Marx, the entrepreneur, the person who seeks opportunity and takes risks based on their own risk return comfort level, didn't come about until, again, with the marginal revolution in the 1870s, where you have capital and labor can't explain change. It's just a standard forms. It can't explain increasing returns to scale. So why don't we stop there on Karl Marx, and then we're going to look at a University of Chicago historian's theory of historical change.